Is a bit, yeah. Like I think the only one that perhaps isn't is the.
Okay, thank you everybody. Good evening and welcome to the second Strategic Scrutiny Committee. Happy New Year to everybody. Before I go through the agenda, I'd just like to say I'd like to add just a very short additional item. It's more for members at the end. Just it'd be nice to have some items to consider for future meetings. So if you have a spare few minutes in this meeting, have a think about any other items you'd like to be discussed in the future. Okay, I have a few kind of notices to read as we've got members of the public here. So there are no planned fire alarms, but should the alarm sound, please leave the building at the nearest fire exit, which is at the back of the room. And just to remind members, officers and the public that filming of meetings is prohibited, but this is being live streamed on Facebook. Anyway, apologies then. We have one apology, I believe.
Yes, Chair, from Councillor Jemima Moore.
Councillor Jemima Moore. Excellent. We need to move to approve and sign the minutes of the Scrutiny Committee held on the 21st of November 2020, unless anybody has any comments, alterations to make there. No, Chair.
2019.
That's a misprint. Yes, 2019. Good spot. Okay, I need all those in favour then of approving those minutes. That's carried. I will sign those. Declarations of interest. Members should be aware to declare any pecuniary interest at the time that they arise on the agenda. We have no Part 2 items, so we don't need to exclude anyone from the meeting. We have no public questions, which is a shame, I think, because we've got lots of public engagement here. Just a reminder to all members of the public, is it 3 days before a meeting?
Yes, the details are on the website.
Yeah, so we do have time allocated for members of the public to ask questions. It would be great to see that used. We had a nice debate last time from a couple of questions from the public, so do use that mechanism. And we have no questions in advance from members under Standing Order 20. So we move straight on to item 7, which is the 2020-2021 Budget, Strategy and Medium-Term Financial Plan. And just to note that this report was presented to the Executive a couple of days ago for their approval, but we're just here to kind of have a discussion if you wish to comment on anything like that. And I'll hand over to Michelle White, our Deputy Chief Finance Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So as the Chair mentioned, this report was presented to Exec on Tuesday. The Section 151 officer also presented the contents of the budget strategy and next year's budget proposals to members at an estimates briefing on the 18th of December. So apologies if many of you already heard some of the key headlines. So if I start off with really the good news in terms of the implementation of the government's fair funding review and business rates review has been put back a year to 21-22, which means that the cuts we were anticipating have been postponed for 12 months. Instead, we've had a provisional settlement which gives local authorities a 1-year rollover settlement, which is basically last year's funding uplifted for inflation. So for 2021, next year, we're able to propose a balanced budget without requiring additional savings to those already identified, and whilst factoring in the spending pressures listed in Appendix 1. The financial plans also keep revenue balances, i.e. the general fund working balance, above minimum prudent levels, which for the general fund is deemed to be 3 million. The figures in the report are based on the provisional settlement. The final settlement is due to be announced at the end of January. We're not anticipating any major changes. The budget strategy also assumes that council tax will increase by £5 on a Band E property, which is the maximum increase allowed without triggering a referendum, which is obviously a councillor decision to be made in February. In terms of the capital programme, there are no new capital schemes proposed, so that we're not seeking any approval for any additional funds there. So moving on to the less good news, in fact bad news, the business rate reset will impact from 21-22, and this is expected to result in a significant reduction. as we are currently benefiting from retaining business rates at much higher than our assessed needs. This is coupled with an expected phased end to new homes bonus. So from 2021, we've got in 2.4 million, dropping down to nil by 23-24. The outcome of this, and the key message from the Section 105 officer that's in the body of the report, is that there is a projected 3.7 million funding gap in 3 years from 21-22, which will require difficult decisions to be made over next year to identify budget reductions. So broadly, in the medium-term financial plan, we are looking at savings of 1.2 million over the next 3 years to achieve that funding gap. That's really the key headlines, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Councillor Atkinson.
Hello, there are lots of people in the audience here, so doesn't like me. Okay.
Would you mind swapping with Councillor Lamb just for a moment? We can get another microphone to you.
This is clearly very bad news, but what I would like to know from the officers here is that since 2010, how much money have we lost from the government? And my understanding of it is that by next year we will have lost all money that we got from central government in the grant. So that's 100% loss of our revenue. And the only way that we can make that money up to finance services, including financing how we can meet carbon zero reductions, will have to come from income. And for instance, I know a lot of people are rather concerned about our car parks, and a lot of people in the audience would perhaps like to see us having no car parks in Exeter and no cars coming through. But I understand that without the £8 million funding being replaced that we get from car parks, this council would go bankrupt and would not exist. Is that a fair summary of where we are financially?
Michelle.
So in terms of the first point, in terms of all funding disappearing, I said the government are in the process of doing a fair funding review. So we will continue to have funding in terms of business rates and council tax, but they are reassessing our needs. Yeah, so the new homes bonus we are anticipating will disappear, but we will get retention of business rates and council tax, but business rates are a much lower level than we're currently getting.
Yeah, so should we just address the specific question with that?
Yes, please.
About the grant?
Would you like to come in, Kareem?
Would that be okay, Chair?
Absolutely.
So, because it can get confusing, because you get a blend of funding, so it appears that funding has remained the same, but the implication for the council is profoundly different. So when austerity began, we used to get 10.6 million of grant. So that was just grant. We never had any receipts from business rates. That went nationally. When the government introduced that, they changed the way we were funded, and they said we would incentivize your behavior to grow the economy. Hence, you gave me a title when you appointed me that said Growth Director, because basically government said they would replace grant with local authorities. If they built houses, would keep new homes bonus, and if you grew business rates, you would take a share of the growth in the business rates. We used to capture £76 million worth of business rates in the city. We'd send that to national government, and we got a grant that came in, as I said, 10.6 million. Since then, we've grown business rates, and we've done better than the national in terms of the growth of the business rates, and the growth has meant, and that's what has been referenced back now, and the government has said that growth will be reset. So that's what we're going to lose. So the government has a calculation that they think we only require a certain amount of money to deliver services. And that's an important point, because this is a thing that's really challenging for local authorities. Melanie Dawes, who's the Director General of the Ministry of Housing, Communities, Local Government, goes to the Select Committee, and she tells the Select Committee, we allocate money based on what we think are the statutory services that councils have to deliver. All the things that you take great pride in terms of shaping a city, place shaping, the things that are discretionary, that's not what the government believes is your statutory requirements. So for most councils to deliver those kind of things, you have to support a growing economy to give you the new homes, to give you the business rates and new homes bonus. And what we've tried to do also is to get the other commercial opportunities, because if your high street is full, you collect the rents that go with it. So in very simple terms, they replace grant, we get funding back, but it's called business rates and new homes bonus. And now the wonderful news that you've now delivered to us is we're now going to lose the growth that we earned. The business rates gets reset. We've got to start all over again, the process of building business rates. They might have great reasons why they're doing it, but for this council, that has an impact. And you will know they're going to kind of bleed out the new homes bonus, so that we will no longer get new homes bonus. We've got now to deal with that 3.7 million shortfall.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councillor Deemore.
Thank you. Okay, I have a few points. Just wondering, in the medium-term financial forecast, whether the projected income from the new recycling facilities that was listed in the report a few months ago is included, and also the reduction in the gate fees, sending waste to the incinerator, whether the reductions from that, I assume there'll be reductions, are included. And just a couple of other small points. I'm just wondering what the budget is for it says there's a line for climate change for next year, and why it's removed in 21-22. And I'd also like to know what the budget for council signage is for, please.
Michelle?
Thank you, Councillor Moore. So in terms of the first 2 points, I will need to come back to you on those to confirm whether they've been factored in. And in terms of the climate change 50,000, that's a one-off. So when it's not a recurring budget, we put it in as a spending pressure, then we take it back out the following year. That comprises a number of elements for a specialist university team to conduct some research. We're looking for some baseline CO2 data, so that'll be a one-off exercise. And we're looking for support for a growth programme focused on females in Devon, and then there's a balance unallocated, but it's a provision specifically for 21-22, and then it will fall back out again unless it's rebid for. Okay, thank you. And in terms of the signage, I think that's an extension of an ongoing programme. There are signage already going up around the council, but it will be replacing existing signage around the city. I'm not too sure. I will need to come back to you about any specific locations that you want on those. Is that okay?
Councillor Atkinson?
Sorry, it doesn't like me. I just wanted to come back on that point specifically. If we were to phase out car parking, on-street parking, to deter anybody coming into the town centre and lose that income, what couldn't we do with that loss of 8 million on top of the loss of 2.37 million? That's 11 million. What would we not be able to do? So, I mean, this is just like the hard facts of our life. I'd just like to understand them.
Kareem or Michelle?
So we've got gross and net budgets.
I'll give you broad, and if I get it wrong, Michelle can correct me on the figures, but roughly you've got 40 million of gross and 12.5 million of net budget. You have an income of 8 million. Of that 40 million is from car parking. We mentioned the other issues. When you think your controllable budget is around about 12.5 million, you think of all the things you do with that 12.5 million, if 8 million were to finish, what we would do. So like all these things, but how many members have been aware that we've replaced basically 10 million of grant over the last 9 years, and what has been the change in services? We've worked really hard. 50% of our management capacity is gone in this organisation, 29% of the headcount. We still deliver services. We would find ways of how we do it, but we got to be more commercial, and the government forces down that commercial route.
Thank you very much. I see no more questions. Councillor Owen?
Just a quick point, Chair. At the beginning of the meeting, you wished us Happy New Year. I wonder if you knew something we didn't know.
Lots of rainbows, yeah. Lots of rain. Sorry, Councillor Owen, I can't comment on that. Councillor Moore?
Thank you. In light of Councillor Atkins' comments, I do think we ought to reconsider whether we charge Thursday night parking and reclaim the £35,000 that's being lost over the year from not charging those car parking fees, whether they're electric vehicles or not.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no other members wishing to speak, so I'll thank you, Michelle, for coming along. As I said, this report has already gone to executive, so that's really just a discussion for us to have. Okay, brilliant. We move on to item number 8, which is it's an update really on the Towards Carbon Neutral Exeter, and we have some excellent speakers here tonight. We've got Kareem Hassan, who we should all know, our Chief Executive and Growth Director, who's really passionate about this subject and has been working really hard on it. We've also got Councillor Rachel Sutton, who is the portfolio holder for Culture and Climate, and I'm always happy for officers and Councillor Sutton if she wishes to jump in at any time in the debate. But we have Liz O'Driscoll here, who is from Exeter City Futures. She's a programme director there. And Liz is going to do a presentation for us. Just going to talk, yeah. And then we will have questions, and we can look at this roadmap in detail. Just to point out, I think, really, because sometimes I think the relationship between Exeter City Futures and the council is unclear. Liz O'Driscoll is not an officer of the council, she's a partner of the council, and I'm sure Liz will outline kind of where Exeter City Futures are kind of in relationship to us, but Liz isn't an officer, so she can't be held to account in the same way that Michelle or others can be. But it's really good to have Liz here, so over to you.
Oh, for the mic. Thank you for inviting me to come here and give you an update. What I want to say actually before I really go into it is that they asked us to prepare the reports for these committee meetings ages ago. So the document that you have actually I prepared at the beginning of December, and our team has been working incredibly hard and at quite a pace. So where we are today is actually fairly different from the report that you've got. So I'm just going to tell you where we are, and then obviously I can take questions about what you think about that. The baseline or the key facts document in the report says it went out before Christmas. I think those of you eagle-eyed will have spotted that in fact it didn't. The reason for that actually is purely a quality issue. When I reviewed the document on the day that I wrote the report, it looked ready to go. There were a couple of errors that I found, and I took a management decision that actually I didn't feel it was ready to go out in the public eye, so I held it back. That actually has gone out today. It is out. It's already starting some really interesting conversation about the data that we've collected from the sources. It is a collation of publicly available referenced facts. It's not data that we've generated, collected or analysed. It is referenced facts from validated sources. As I say, it is opening some really interesting conversation, and our hope is that actually it will increase a culture of data collection and sharing across the city. It's right that people start to question some of those facts. I think data is really interesting depending on the assumption that you put on it, and I think that challenge and debate is really welcome and exactly the point of that document. Today we've also launched a designated microsite to support our journey to net zero. It's on the screen here, just so that you can see that it actually is a real thing. That's gone out. It's going to support our journey to net zero and is providing information on an emerging summit programme. And I think it's important to say it is emerging. Our aim is to hold the summit on March 26th. At the football club. We looked at the football club venue yesterday. The people helping me organise really liked it. I really like it, so I think it's a good central location for us to hold this summit on March the 26th. That's hot off the press, only decided that today. So I think, you know, it is important to go through. Lots of things have happened and changed over the last few months. The Devon Climate Emergency Response Group is working. They've commissioned some figures around CO2 emissions across the region, and some of you have spotted we've used some of their latest data in our baseline report. It is a validated piece of data that they have published. At the moment, I have no better data to include, therefore that's the data value that we've put in our report. What I think is important, and is always a struggle, I think, with these kinds of things, is that we put reports out when we say this is what we think we're going to do. In the private sector a lot, and largely in the public sector, and certainly in this case, as I've started to try to deliver it in the way that I felt in July, August I was going to deliver it, it hasn't really panned out like that. You know, I've engaged with different people, I've talked to engagement organisations, I've talked to experts, and there's been new ideas shared and different ways talked about doing things. So in the report it looks like we've not done stuff, but it's not because we have failed to do it, it's because as we've evolved the process and as we've learned more about what we need to do, actually our plans have changed and evolved for, I believe, for the better. It is really difficult then to be held to account for something that I said 5 months ago that was something we hadn't done before, and now it actually looks like something really different. I think it's, you know, it's really positive where we're at. The terminology in the paper, in the original Towards a Carbon Neutral Exeter paper, the terminology of a carbon neutral working group actually gave a really wrong impression externally, and following that I was inundated, as were a number of the officers, with a lot of commercial proposals, as it were, of people who wanted to be part of this group because they felt it was some kind of procurement framework or pre-qualification that would allow them to then be delivering solutions. And that wasn't what I meant at all. What I meant was people coming together to think about what it is that we need to do and how that might play out over the next 10 years. We are embarking on a transformation, and I think that's also important to recognise. And we talk about quick practical action and change and why haven't we done something today, and actually if you think about something, it's a totally different end of the scale of importance, I get that, but it is an analogy. If we're going to roll out a new IT system into your business, you wouldn't click your fingers and say, well, on Monday guys we're all going to be on Windows 22, or you might move on to Windows XP here, but you know, you wouldn't do that, would you? You would say, you know, in a year's time or in 18 months' time, this is going to happen, and then some people would remain on the old system, and then gradually, you know, new starters might get the new thing, and when machines are redundant, they move over. And I think that is, we have to be pragmatic. That's what we're going to. You know, there are some quick things that we will be able to identify to do, but we do have to recognise it is a transformation, and it won't all happen on one day. So what we need to be doing over the next month really is trying to get ourselves clear and on the same page about the challenges that we face. So I didn't want to jump straight to supplier solutions, so that working group wasn't set up in that way. The other thing is the recognition that actually over the last 3 years, Exeter City Futures and a number of other organisations, including the council, have done consultations, engagements, discussions, asking people about this, asking people what they think about that. I actually think people are getting fed up of being asked again and again and again, what is it we need to do? I think we know what we need to do. And I think, you know, I have become over the last few months more and more certain of the fact that actually we do all know what we need to do. And I thought it was quite timely this morning that there was an interview out with David Attenborough, and one of his quotes from it is, you know, this urgent problem needs to be solved and we all know how to do it. What we need to do is work out why we are not doing it. And actually that's very much the tack that I believe we now need to take as we run into the summit. We know we need to decarbonise transport. We know we need to increase the energy efficiency of homes. We know we need to concentrate on biodiversity and changing our land use to support carbon sequestration and other valuable land issues. Our goals, ECF's goals, the goals that we've created through engagement process, are really set out and echo a lot of the agreed literature of what needs to be changed. If I look at UK panel on climate change, if I watch David Attenborough debates and discussions, when I listen and read, all the same things are coming up again and again and again, which is reinforcing my view. We know what we need to do. So our goals, the 12 goals we have, reflect much of that. And in effect, I believe this provides a blueprint already for a net zero Exeter. I think we could collate that, and we will collate that into a single document that will in essence provide a blueprint for what a carbon neutral city needs to and should look like. And actually what we need to now do is start to call for people to understand that, scrutinise it and commit to it. And that really is about asking ourselves realistically, what are the challenges that we need to overcome in order to deliver this? And there are challenges, there are huge challenges, not least in the face of the budget cuts that we just talked about that are happening for the local authority, but businesses are struggling, individual families are often struggling, you know, they're full, they're concerned with things, and we really need to start to ask them and ask the businesses and ask ourselves, you know, how do we get over these financial, technical, political and behavioural and attitude challenges. So we have designed our programme. You can find out some of the details on it on this website. Again, you know, I'm going to be honest with you, I could have sat on this for another 2 weeks while we formalise the programme and get it all shipshape and absolutely perfect, but I think there is a void that needs to be filled in terms of what we're doing. So it's up, it's live, you can watch it evolve, and you can call me and email me and put some opinions in if you want to do that. We have partnered with an organisation using funding kindly provided from Exeter City Council to design a programme of engagement with Encounters Arts, which is a Totnes-based arts organisation. They will be setting up a public engagement across 10 sites in the city. We are selecting those with input from councillors and community leaders. So we've been talking with the community builders. There will be, if there hasn't already, an email coming out to councillors to ask them, you know, have they got any particular sites that they'd like to set up. I think it's important to say that Encounters are quite skilled at getting engagement from people that aren't the usual suspects. So they have very clear requirements on their sites, areas with really high footfall. So they look at sort of shopping centre car park outside of community centres and schools, and they are working, and we should have those sites agreed within the next couple of weeks, because I know that we want to start to get information out to the public so they can know where they can come along. They have I don't want to call it like a caravan. It's like a kind of a caravan. They call it chrysalis. So they turn up and they have a caravan type vehicle. That's the word I'm looking for, vehicle. And they will create an invitation for people to come in and explore. What we're really going to be exploring through that is if we're all saying we're committed to climate change and the climate emergency, this document, provocation, this blueprint, is what our city is going to need to look like. What do you think about this? And they're going to be picking up where are there areas of concern, where are there areas where people are really supportive about this, are there particular communities that are more worried about one area than the other, but also do people generally as a public understand and embrace the need for making change, that this change for this important objective is actually going to affect them. They are going to have to do something about it, and it is going to mean change for them. And I think that's really important if we're going to do this and be sustainable, because we don't want to be carbon neutral by 2030 and not carbon neutral by 2031. We want to be carbon neutral by 2030 and in perpetuity, if not moving towards, you know, better than that, if that's something that's possible. So that will come out. Alongside that, there are 3 workshops that are in plan. I believe councillors already have a date scheduled in their diary. If you haven't seen it yet, it's in your inbox, to come along for a workshop. And those workshops will be with political leaders, business leaders and community leaders, and will be a 2.5-hour facilitated workshop to really think about the challenges and the barriers to delivering that blueprint. So what policy barriers, what financial barriers, what are the business community worried about, what are they prepared to do, what action are they prepared to take? And then judging the timing right, we will have the community leaders workshop picking up some of the insights and outcomes that's coming from that wider engagement being done by encounters. All this will inform the summit programme. At the moment we are thinking of having feedback of different perspectives and some questions and answers in the morning, like a more formal session, and then in the afternoon we're playing with some ideas around more conversations and open mics for people to come and give their perspectives in. The aim of the conference also is to get businesses that are attending to actually make pledges for them to be carbon neutral. And certainly one of the objectives we've already got in the blueprint is that all businesses across the city make a pledge to make their own operations carbon neutral, starting with Exeter City Futures member organisations, of which the City Council, the County Council and the University have already made a pledge to be carbon neutral, direct operations by 2030 for all cases, I believe. The Royal Devon and Exeter Hospital have released a good sustainability plan. It says that they will support the city to be carbon neutral, but actually doesn't make a specific. And then Exeter College and Oxygen House are en route. Those documents are coming. And then obviously every layer of business underneath that needs to start to think to make the same thing. Insights from the engagement will be shown at an exhibition at the summit. So Encounters will create some kind of art installation that will showcase the insights that have come from the public. And all the information that we get from all of that will form the Exeter Net Zero Plan, which I will deliver to Karim Hassan, Chief Executive of City Council, in March. And that's a lot for me to talk to you about. It does leave the mandate group, and I've left this to the end because it was something else that I proposed that we had, was that Exeter City Futures set up a carbon neutral mandate group. I paused on that a bit while I was watching the Devon Climate Emergency Response Group and their Citizens Assembly. And really I open myself and ask you what you think here. You know, logically, given the number of people I'm then involving through that extensive process, I'm struggling to see the function that a further mandate group that would be a smaller number of people would then put on top of that wider engagement. You know, do we want a smaller group to then change what that bigger group has collated, or do we just collate it and hand it to the council? And I welcome your views really on what you think we should do with that. As a slight aside, we have won some National Lottery funding, which I'm just going to plug in there. So that's 18 months of effort from our team to win that, and I think it's a really good validation of the work that they've done and the engagement activities. And that funding will support the team to build partnerships between communities and businesses to generate projects in response to local issues on this agenda. So that's everything, I think.
Thank you very much. An excellent presentation. And actually, I think it's nice to have sometimes without a PowerPoint. It's just nice to talk sometimes, isn't it? Councillor Sutton.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that great presentation, Liz. And I just really, because I know people will want to get involved in the discussion and may well have questions, but just wanted to make a few points on this. Oxygen House, the organisation that was one of the key players in setting up Exeter City Futures, is all about data. It is actually about establishing facts and data and devising and developing plans on that basis. And that, I think, potentially is one of the reasons why some people might feel a little frustrated about the speed at which things might be happening. But I'm not a scientist, but I've hung around with scientists long enough to know that unless you actually have robust baseline data when you start, you are in no way going to be able to plot how far you've travelled, or indeed how far you haven't travelled in due course, because you don't know what you're comparing it to. And it's no good saying, well, I kind of think it's a bit less busy than it used to be. And that's why the need to go through these detailed processes as a starting point is absolutely vital. And I think we're kind of getting to that point now where we have got that data and we can actually start seeing us moving forward, and that was really positive to me. The other point is it's about working in collaboration and partnership, and as Liz had already said, when we first started talking about this, it was before Devon had announced what it wanted to do, and correctly in my view, we are looking at how we engage and work in partnership with that group rather than setting up something in parallel that's going to either duplicate or compete with what's already going on. And again, that is that part of this evolution as we go forward. It's always going to be a balance. We have to take responsibility for the people we represent, whose jobs are at risk if the high street fails. And if their jobs are at risk, then their homes are at risk. So, you know, we might be able to come up with a utopian solution that says if we were starting from here, we would do this. But we're not starting from here, we're starting from there in the messy way that people's lives are. Well, mine is anyway, I don't know about yours. Again, we have to actually take people on this journey with us, and we have to be mindful of the pressures and the stresses and the worries that they have. You know, if one of your family is employed by, I don't know, say Flybe, and then you're worried about whether you can afford new shoes for the kids, you know, biodiversity and trees is going to be a bit further down your list of things to be getting on with. I'm not saying you don't think it's important, but you know, it is Maslow's triangle of needs. There are certain things that are essential before you start moving on to other things. And finally, you know, listen to Radio 4 as I do. Something struck me in a programme a few weeks ago, and it kind of stuck with me. Somebody said, you can't insult people into agreeing with your point of view. And I've been hanging on to that because, you know, it's all too easy, isn't it, to tell people what they're doing wrong or what they haven't done enough of or what that kind of thing. But as I say, we have to take people on that journey and persuade them to come with us, not lecture them about what they've been doing wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sutton. Councillor Newby.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't hear any mention of trees. Are we looking at tree planting? And can we, if possible, I mean, part of our planning remit is 20% of green space from developers. How about them putting their hands in their pockets and paying for some trees and planting them properly? I've got an issue on the Newcourt estate where they've planted them, walked away and just left them. They're all dead. And that to me is a waste of good wood. They could have supported that properly with their planting, mulching and watering, and they never did. So we've lost nearly 6 years of good growth. And I think that's deplorable. I did a little bit of planting outside the front of my house. Don't tell Devon County Highways, please. I've increased the bird population, and the blackbirds have gone up down my neck of the woods tenfold. I'm really pleased. I've got blue tits nesting in 6 trees, or did have. A bit cold now for them, but it's not a hard thing to do if we can get these people on board. If they're developing, pay for some trees.
I will take that back. Now you'll know because you've been on planning committee.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, is that okay to come back on that?
Yeah.
That we do put conditions around that, and often those conditions do actually say that if the first planting fails, the developers have to go back. So it might be worth just kind of having just having a look to see if that was one of the conditions. I mean, there are a tremendous number of trees in the city. I think I heard that something like 24% of the city area does have trees on it, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But there's still work to be done, and there's still opportunities. I know, families that I'm aware of have actually planted trees in our parks, and if people want to do that, our parks staff will be only too happy to work with people to find suitable sites for donated trees. I know former councillors, the Morrishes, have been commemorated with a couple of very beautiful trees in Tree Pleasure Ground. So there are opportunities, but I will take that specific comment back.
Councillor Atkinson.
I've got about 5 points. I will go through them if that's okay. Thank you very much for the equality impact assessment. I just wonder if we could add another part to this, because as originally envisaged by the Labour Party, the Equalities Act 2010 included a 10th protected characteristic of socio-economic grounds. And I think it would be really good if we could include that in our impact assessment to take account of the impact on people from an impoverished background of any climate emergency changes we have, certainly in relation to passive house and energy efficiency. And I think that would be something very good that we could actually shout about. In relation, because we've got a lot of people in the audience, and I think we do have some good news, I'm going to ask, really, as part of the city plan, this is down to the Chief Executive and Growth Director, what plans do we have to make our 5,000 council houses zero carbon, actually retrofitting, as a meeting to help meet those targets? And what came up when I spoke to people at the beginning is they're very concerned about city developments that are not passive house. All our developments, as I understand it, are passive house. But when people get planning permission, there's not a passive house or zero carbon requirement. Now, my understanding from you was that back in 2014, the Conservative government actually refused to implement or actually removed some of the sustainable targets for planning and building regulations, and we're still waiting for those to come in. And so I'm asking you, is it still the case that we can't insist through planning laws that for the same standard of buildings that we require of ourselves, that we can't require of those of in the private sector? And what, if anything, we can do to get the government to change and to make that a planning requirement? Obviously, that would require business, that would require legislation, as I understand it. And what do we know anything about the government's plans to do that?
Councillor, should I just stop there and then let Karim respond, or are they all kind of linked to the same?
Well, my next point is very quick. Is linked to our plans to retrofit to make all our properties sustainable. Can you tell us a bit about the plans to work with other councils to get modular factory together to build those stuff that we can do it? And lastly, in relation to the mandate group, I can't really comment on that because I haven't seen the terms of reference. And I don't know if this includes Devon County as well. So in order to get feedback from me as a councillor, I'd need to know more about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to be really brief because your agenda is going to deal with that. We'll answer that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm delighted you got the agenda.
Oh, did I miss that?
Yeah, they've got a presentation about retrofitting.
There's no presentation slides here, so
I'm sure Adrian will answer all your questions in a short while.
Plus, Chair, the building regulation, Howard will...
And we've got Howard after that.
Yeah.
It's almost as if we predicted your question, Councillor Atkinson. Not to worry. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I've got a set of questions in 4 sections. Would you like me to present them all in one go, or would you like them in sections?
Let's do it. Go through it all at once, and then we'll allow the officers to kind of respond as they see fit.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for your presentation, and congratulations on your lottery funding. That's very exciting in order to be able to work with communities to help tackle climate change. So the first set of questions is around sort of expectations and accountabilities. The report acknowledges the risk of lack of public support But I think we must also acknowledge the massive public support that we've seen here in Exeter for urgent action on climate change, including the Fridays for a Future climate strikes, the work of XR and other organisations and individuals who are calling for and taking action. And we also do again have to acknowledge David Attenborough, who says the moment of crisis has come in our efforts to tackle climate change. So I feel that if we don't acknowledge the positive backing for this as well and just look at we need to explore the barriers, but just to recognise barriers, we actually risk a lack of credibility and some public anger on a lack of action, whether this is perceived or real. So we have to not let it be seen as a stalling. So in relation to the mobilisation summit, what is the ask? Are people and organisations being asked to comment, contribute or consult on options or deliberate on something that has been decided, or just bring their thoughts? You've sort of elucidated that it's going to be around the goals. There's been much research into behavioural and practical barriers, so I feel it's really important that the Council is really clear about the status of the mobilisation summit and what it will practically contribute to the process. So I'd like to know, perhaps Councillor Sutton might be able to answer, how will the Council treat and respond to the output and outcomes of the summit? Is the expectation that it will override or update any consultations or policies, or is it going to be a consultation in any way? I think it would be really helpful perhaps if the Council and Exeter City Futures could prepare a statement of intent and engagement so that everybody who participates could be clear in advance. The second question is around the Citizens' Assembly. So how will the Council treat the outcomes and outputs from the Citizens' Assembly being convened by the University and Devon County Council? So, and I agree with Councillor Atkinson around the mandate group. I can't really comment because I'm not wholly clear what its original purpose was on that. So, but maybe the first two would be. That's my first set of questions. Do you want me to carry on, or do you want to respond?
We'll take all your questions at once, and then we'll respond after. Probably.
Okay. So. Okay, so thank you for talking about the information about data. I'm interested in the report you've set out how many tonnes of CO2 Exeter emits. I assume that's on the basis of the reporting under the Paris Change Agreement. And also the other report mentions the energy use figures quoted. So are you recommending that the Council adopts those figures in your report? Or are you saying that this new data will produce new figures and we adopt those? And will that be easy to measure in the future, and will they remain valid compared to what we might have to report under the Paris Change Agreement, Climate Change Agreement? This afternoon you sent through the key facts document. Thank you very much for that. And I've had a little skim through. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Newby about tree cover and biodiversity. We've talked about that a bit. It'd be really good if there was a section on that. I didn't have time to read it all to see if there was. And I just wondered if walking was mentioned as a key measure under mobility. And I agree with Councillor Atkinson about affecting the poorest in our communities. The original climate change motion did reference the Sustainable Development Goals, and we need to have social justice alongside climate justice for this to be effective. Okay, so my third set. So my third set of questions is around the framework. So the roadmap is a high-level plan. Is it right to assume that all the major stakeholders in the city will sign up, despite their different plans and perhaps divergent dates in reaching climate neutrality? And in June 2019, we looked at this at the Scrutiny Committee, and it said it's now critical that Exeter defines a clear delivery roadmap that sets out the scale of the challenge and the likely investment required. So the report that you presented talked about the lack of capacity to highlight gaps between current plans and what is required to achieve carbon neutrality. So how do you think that work will be completed? And the next question is specifically around council responsibilities. So the council is making good progress on many aspects of its carbon reduction of its operations in relation to its estates. And notwithstanding that work, what audit of the council's strategies, policies and plans have been made to see how they are contributing towards achieving carbon neutrality? I've only got 2 more points, bear with me. In the July 2019 Council minutes, there's a recommendation that this work should identify immediate opportunities and crucial first steps. Can I receive an update on the work and know what these are? And I wondered, in light of the discussion as well, whether previously the Council agreed that all reports would include the impact on climate neutrality as one of the aspects that are included in reports alongside equalities and such like. And I wonder if that should be implemented from now rather than actually waiting for the roadmap to come through. Because I'm not quite sure when that if it's presented in March, how long will that take before that gets adopted by the Council? And this links to my final point, which is, please can the portfolio holder explain the timetable and process for the adoption of the roadmap, and is delivering investment plans within the Council, which may be a separate thing.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. So if we have kind of responses, and then if you've got any follow-up questions, we'll take them after they've responded. Is that all right? I imagine it's going to be a triple act.
If I can just start, can we all acknowledge the scale of what we're talking about? Yeah? Because no one else has done it yet. Making a city carbon neutral and doing it in 10 years, I don't know anywhere that's done this. And I've said to you, we have a gross budget of 40 million and a 12 million net budget. And we've made a commitment to be carbon neutral in 2030. And we've been out and we've brought in the university, the college, county council, the hospital, the police. We've been out meeting every stakeholder to sign up to that statement, so that our mission statement for the city says we will become carbon neutral in 2030 and we will be one of the sustainable cities. And that's a global statement. That's the ambition. One of the things you have to do when you're a chief executive of a local authority, when you're faced every year with a cut, a 10% cut on your gross budget we've had to do every year for a decade virtually, is you have to be comfortable with ambiguity. Because if you were to set out at the beginning that we're going to achieve it and you don't have the resources, we don't have the resources today to deliver a carbon neutral city in 10 years, we've got to find different ways how we tackle it. You asked a question about retrofit and you're going to hear it. There's 54,000 homes in the city. To be carbon neutral in 10 years, we're going to have to address how we retrofit every domestic property, every commercial property in the city. That's the scale of the challenge. So when you say, what is going to be the result of this, you're going to produce this blueprint and you're going to deposit it to me as a city council chief executive, but has got a commitment signed off by all these stakeholders to say, this is what we are going to have to achieve. And it won't be done by council on its own. It will be done by the construction companies, by the energy companies, and everybody's got a stake in the city to do it. And we're up for that as a city. And it's now incorporated into the local industrial strategy, which is now with Whitehall, as the thing that we're going to do to drive productivity in this region. We'll be the clean growth part of the UK. This is the region that will deliver that clean growth. So what we're working on is how did this city become the beacon that shows you how to do it. That's what we're, so councillor, to you, I'm saying to you, that's what I've got to take on board. And that's what we as an organisation are committed to do. And what the blueprint's got to do is work out what that map is, what is it going to cost, and then all the behavioural issues that are associated with that, which we begin to reveal through the sporting and local delivery pilot, which is getting into the behavioural issues that we're all going to have to go into when you're giving up the car, because you're not going to be able to drive in some of our streets. And at the same time, we've got to manage the consequences for our firms. So, as an overall statement, I said about being comfortable with ambiguity is because today, I don't think anybody can say, here's a document, And that's telling you it's fully resourced, fully staffed to be able to do it. What you're going to hear later on is the presentation on retrofit, and it'll give you one small pilot, and it gives you all the indications of the scale of investment we're going to need. And the funding mechanisms that the government couldn't crack. Because the chap who's down there, Ian Hutchcroft, was the person tasked. I was sitting with Ian, we were going to do the Green Deal for the region. And the government was backing behind that. And the government backed out. It was the government's failure on that. And now, we as a city are saying, we do what the government can do. And the reality is, across the world, that's what's happening. It's the cities that are responding to this challenge and showing the leadership. And all I'm going to say, before you answer the question, is if you bear with us and accept there's a bit of ambiguity at the beginning, what I'm hoping is this workshop will come up with the clarity that I think will be required. We will know what the scale of the challenge, and already I can say in the last 12 months, the conversation with the CEOs in the city, and indeed some of the leading construction companies, is of a different order. They are now telling me, that's the commitment, now we just got to find a way of working it. But they're all saying, if we do it and we crack it as a city, from a point of view of getting clean growth, that will tackle the social issues that you're raising, what a fantastic way of doing it. You imagine 2,500 people skilled up to retrofit every property in the city, every one of our schools connected with the construction companies that will deliver this kind of technology. You know, not just dealing with the climate issue, you're dealing with economic opportunities as well. It is a fantastic opportunity. It's not all difficult. It's fantastic opportunities for us. Well, Liz, sorry, I didn't answer you.
Sorry about that.
Okay, I'll try and answer as many as I can remember in the way that I can. The first question around the mobilisation summit and the ask. Those are really loaded words, actually, and I am not, and never have professed to be, a community engagement specialist, nor am I a local government trained person, and I'm quite conscious of the fact that comment, contribute and consult are all quite important words in the context of engagement, and they do all mean slightly different things. Honestly, I struggle to know what the value of the words and how they should play out. I am a specialist in transformational change. You know, my job and my career history is knowing that if I want to move an organisation, and in this context I'm thinking about the city as a complex multi-siloed organisation, how do we move an organisation from thinking and being and doing like this to thinking and being and doing like that, and how do we do it in a way that engages and brings those people along so that they understand what needs to happen and why they need to change. I absolutely accept that there is a lot of people in the city who are very active in climate change. It's been seen, as you said, with the Fridays for the Future. Great, we met them, you know, great people, you know, really enthusiastic, and I got a lot of time to listen to that. Ditto the other organisations, and I had some people come and visit me from Extinction Rebellion, and we had a really great chat, and there's lots of people who are very passionate, but as a proportion of the city, that's not 95% and plus that are coming to me with those conversations all the time. And actually, even if there's a very small proportion of people that don't know or understand or have engaged. So for me, and again, the Mobilisation Summit has no special significance in terms of consultation. It is my design as a transformational change expert of something I believe is important as the first step in our journey to move from here to there. And for me, it's really about saying, do the people and the businesses and the politicians and the general public understand the scale of the challenge, the kinds of things they are going to be asked to do and not do? What does that mean for those in terms of poverty? You know, how do we make sure that energy efficient homes are affordable homes? This is not about only the stuff that the rich people can afford. This is the solutions that will work for everybody. And the purpose for me of both the engagement, the workshops and the summit is the first step in any transformational change journey, which is to say, do we collectively understand and accept the scale of the challenge and know what it is that we will need to do? And it feels long to not give it to Kareem until March, but in the scheme of it, I genuinely believe, through my experience of doing these kind of programs before, if we get this bit right, then we will map through a sustainable journey that brings us to carbon neutral by 2030 and sustains us beyond that. If we rush at it with a load of stuff now, then we risk getting things wrong that puts people off and makes groups disaffected. So that's how I am treating the Mobilisation Summit, and that's the significance for me. And what I've asked my team to deliver at the end of that, and the people working with me, is a document plan that we can give to the council that says, this is what our city believes we need to do. So this is the experts and everybody else, you know, in terms of the flavour and the feel of making sure that we keep with this, making sure Exeter remains a great place to live as well as being carbon neutral, that actually outlines the challenge statements that we need to overcome. So the business community need to overcome this, and these businesses need to take on that. This is the energy from here. And I can give that over absolutely robustly, saying this is what we believe the city collectively are prepared and able and willing to do, and they understand that. The second thing is I want to feel at the end of the day that people have understood the challenge. So the programme will be designed to have some conversations and discussions from different perspectives so that people can go away thinking, yes, actually, no, I get that. I know what that will mean for me. And then the third thing really is to get as many businesses as possible at that summit to pledge to making their own operations carbon neutral. So for me, that summit is a success, is at the end of the day, have I got a number of commitments from business organisations to join in. So that's that. What ECC, how ECC treat the output, Exeter City Council treat the outcome once I hand the document over, that's really for Kareem or Rachel to comment on. So hopefully that answers that. Do you want me to just run through them all? The outcomes of the Citizens' Assembly, again, that's a council question. It's important to note that I am sitting on the tactical working group of the Devon Climate Emergency Response Group. So I am representing Exeter's views and plans as they are emerging into that, alongside the guy from North Devon and East Devon. And our plan that I will deliver to Kareem before the Citizens' Assembly sits. And as I understand it, what I produce as a document can be used, if it is chosen to do so, can be used as an input to that Citizens' Assembly, and also then to the task force that then will deliberate the recommendations from that Citizens' Assembly with all the other evidence that goes in. Devon County are also on our board of ECF, so you know there's enough relationship linkages, even with nothing being written down. Mandate group we discussed. I think I don't have anything extra to add at the moment.
Councillor Sutton, do you want to fill in the gaps from the council
yeah,
perspective?
Yeah, okay. We'll try and fill in the gaps. In terms of what we do when we get these documents, what we do when we've had the summit. The short answer to that, Diana, is at the moment I don't know, because we haven't got them yet. So I'm not going to say, you know, whatever it says we will do, because we may well be asked to do things that are not within our power to do on our own. But what I can give you an assurance is that the political commitment and will is there to make this happen. You know, my portfolio is climate and culture. It's the first time that has actually featured in the title of one of the portfolios. You know, we're not doing this for public relations and image sake. We are doing this because we understand how important it is. So we will look at them. We are committed to doing this. We will give it as much resource and time and energy as I can make happen within the constraints that we have in the council. And if that means we have to stop doing some other things in order to prioritise this, then that is what I shall be arguing for. But you're on the journey with us. I understand that your questions are coming from, an equal commitment to this. We all have to do it. We all have to bring our political colleagues along with us. We have to bring our work colleagues along with it. We have to bring the citizens who represent along with us on this journey. So, we're, in a way, I suppose we're all kind of under the same flag on this one. So,
thank you. So, if you've got any follow-up questions.
I just wanted to respond to that. I completely agree with you, Councillor Sutton. We are all on the same page here. All my points are around public events and engagement, and about being very clear about intention and basis for engagement, and setting that out at the beginning so that everybody is clear, both on participants' point of view and those of us who will be making future decisions about implementing that, so that so that people know how their contributions will be valid. And I will be, and I also think the idea of pledging is great. It's really good. But I do think if there was some opportunity to have a statement of engagement or intent, and you're absolutely right, we aren't necessarily going to suggest what everybody suggests, or people might say we don't want to do 2030, we're happy with 2050, but that commitment has been made. So I think it needs to be clear that actually contributions will be taken seriously, and then it will happen to this. Unfortunately, process here will really help in terms of when we're talking to the public. We need to be absolutely clear so there isn't a misunderstanding, or people don't get cross or over enthusiastic and that's not helpful to anybody. So that's completely what my points are about, in terms of, and encounters will be able to interpret that in a way which is meaningful, I would hope.
Yeah, can I just say, I note the points. We'll make an action to speak with both Kerry Deacon, who's ECF's engagement specialist, and Encounters to see if we can change that. But obviously it is important to note that the statement of engagement or intent that I can produce would be ECF's Exeter Futures engagement with the public, and saying that document will then be delivered to Exeter City Council. What I can't do is a statement of engagement or intent that will say what Exeter City Council will then do when Exeter City Futures delivers them the document.
Thank you. Councillor Lyons.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of days ago, I had an email from one of my residents, and it was too late for her to get the questions in to the committee. So I'm going to ask them on her behalf. I hope she's here listening tonight, because she said she was going to be here. Her first point is, in the first paragraph, the paper towards a carbon neutral Exeter is mentioned as containing a range of recommendations, but there's no link to the paper, no mention of what these recommendations are. So where is this paper, and can it be referenced or linked into the report? That's my first point.
Do you want to take them all? We'll take all the questions and then officers will respond.
Okay. Secondly, there is a little bit about the city plan, the roadmap. And here the report states, our engagement analysis to work to date includes the energy independence report, has defined many of the things we need to do. Again, none of these things we need to do are mentioned in the progress report. Is there no link or reference to this? And thirdly, the launch event, the mobilisation summit, is described as not being about working what to do, but about working out what is standing in our way. This suggests to me that there is already a clear understanding of what needs to be done. Could you tell me where this summarisation is, and what the plans for the wider communications are? And also, the lady would like to know who is going to the mobilisation summit. Will it be open to the public, or is it just the business sector and other officials?
Thank you. I imagine that's mostly for Liz.
Yeah. Please accept my apologies to the lady if she's not picked this up from the report. Actually, the report itself references is an update against the Towards Carbon Neutral Exeter report, and I accept that within the scrutiny report itself there isn't a link to that document. But the recommendations that were made in that document are actually the subheadings of the update report itself. So each of the recommendations is then laid out in the report, and the updates are contained under each of those recommendations within that document. So hopefully, you know, that can be rectified with another read. So the second question that you say is about the engagement work to date and the energy independence report. Actually, they're on the Exeter City Futures website itself. Again, I maybe was remiss not to add a link within the document itself, but the engagement work to date statement refers to the work that Exeter City Futures have done to date, which is presented on its own website. And the third question about working out what not to do, or what to do rather than what's standing in our way. There is a clear understanding of what's already to be done. The Towards Carbon Neutral Exeter report itself states that the framework for delivery would be structured under Exeter City Futures 12 goals. Those are readily available on Exeter City Futures website, and each one of those has a set of features and requirements underneath them. We are taking steps to formalise that into the aforementioned blueprint document, because it's not ideal for people to have to go trawling through 12 goals on a website. So hopefully, you know, that will answer the question just through looking at the website. But I will note for future to put the references back into the document.
And my question about who will be going to the mobilisation summit?
Oh, okay. Yeah, the mobilisation summit will be open for people to register. There isn't a Book Now link on there yet because we haven't got the Eventbrite plugin connected in through the website, and the programme hasn't been launched. But obviously it will be open to the public to the capacity at which the venue, the football club, can take people. Off the top of my head, I don't know what that venue is. We are talking about whether we try to make the exhibition of the engagement responses more open than perhaps seating capacity in the venue is allowed, but I need to work that through. So shortly there'll be a Book Now link on the Net Zero Exeter website.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Buswell.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure what decision we made about adding the carbon neutral paragraph into our council reports, but I think that's very important for a whole variety of reasons, for just keeping it at the top of the agenda and showing that we're doing it. And I would like to urge that we do that, you know, as soon as possible, immediately.
Well, I have noticed that the words "the environment" are already there, but I'm sure.
I think this is very important, isn't it? That we keep it as
you could infer the environment as a climate emergency, but I can understand that. Yeah,
it was a recommendation to that scrutiny.
And it went to the council.
Well, I'm sure that can be worked out. Yes, fine. Excellent. I can see no other members wishing to speak. Sorry.
Very briefly, Chair, my apologies, but I haven't said anything this evening yet. I just wanted to say thank you for what is an excellent presentation. I have the habit of making myself watch through the videos of any meeting I attend, sometimes even twice, and though this is sometimes an interesting chore, I do not always look forward with great pleasure to it or to learning more. I have a feeling that when I look through the video of this meeting, I shall learn more and understand a lot more, and thank you very much. Let's hope that similar meetings take place in future.
That and this wasn't planned, was it, Councillor Pants? But I would actually like to add an additional recommendation, which will invite Liz back to update us on progress made. But I didn't want to set out a timescale because I'd like to ask Liz and probably Councillor Sutton and maybe Kareem when you think that would be best, because I don't want to invite you back with nothing to report on. So I'd like to invite you back, but when would you like to come back?
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at your next meeting is the 12th of March, and that is going to be before the summit. So I suspect it's going to have to be the meeting following that.
Yeah, I mean,
because
find it easy,
you know,
to be
after the
honest.
summit, Liz has got work to do in actually drawing stuff.
There is a lot to do. I mean, if you think actually, if the meeting's the 12th of March, then you're going to be wanting papers like 3 weeks
Yeah,
to a month
exactly.
before
And
that.
nothing
so
much will have.
I think June would be better.
June
I think
would
we'd
be
much rather
better,
have
wouldn't it?
something
Yeah. If
concrete
that's
to discuss
helpful to
after the
committee.
summit and
Yeah.
after you've reported back to Kareem. I think that'd be probably our preference.
It won't meet on the go too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be too long, June.
So all we're looking at, we ain't got long.
Yeah, June.
It's just as quick as we're gonna get it, we've got a climate emergency, we wanna come back as quick as we can, but it's not too much an update, it's simply exclusive. Yeah. Yes, so, I would say my birthday's in April. Do we need a special,
Not your birthday.
Kareem, when is your birthday, Kareem? We'll have that night.
Chair, what I mean is, March is probably too tight for the update.
And we got
I think Kareem, April might be difficult because of PERD.
Yeah, you're right, I was off on one.
We're used to that. Shall we provisionally say June? But I'm sure if we met earlier, nobody's going to say you haven't, stuck to the minutes of the meeting in January. It'll be fine. It depends when Purda is. Let's consult with John Street, see when Purda begins. But let's say June for now.
I mean,
Or
you
we
could
could
always
just say for a future meeting.
I mean, you could always have a consultation before the agenda's finalised, and if there's significant progress in March, that is worth, coming back and possibly even doing a short verbal report rather than asking Liz to produce a long written report.
I would be more than happy to come. I suppose the risk is whether members and people in the general public are happy to indulge the fact that the report itself might not contain as much as I can tell you verbally when I would come in March. That's always a challenge. But if it's possible to do a short verbal report, then I'm more than happy to come along and brief the group at any time. In fact,
I think Councillor Moore.
I'm very happy to wait for the roadmap to be presented to Kareem and then go through whatever council process decided as soon as possible after March so that we can crack on. That would be great.
This is my view. I think it'd be far better to get the summit done and have a report back after May's elections. We have this strange time, don't we? We can't discuss anything, unfortunately. So Sharon, I need to think some wording now for another recommendation. So to invite, the committee would invite Liz O'Driscoll to a meeting at the earliest opportunity. Yeah. Okay. So can I take a vote on adding that as a recommendation to invite? Okay, oh, sorry. I need a second, Councillor Atkinson. Okay, we're now voting on whether to add an additional recommendation to invite Liz O'Driscoll back at earliest opportunity. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay, we're now voting on motions, recommendations 2.1 and now 2.2 together. All those in favour? Again, unanimous. Excellent. Thanks very much. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Sills. Councillor Buswell made a proposal, and can that be made as a recommendation, please?
Not now. We've passed these.
Well, it was made before the.
I think we agreed to discuss that with John Street and just make sure it happens. Basically, it's already been passed as a recommendation, so we just need to implement
It's
that.
the time scaling. It was the recommendation originally was to be wait until the roadmap was presented, but that could take quite a number of months to go through council. So it's about keeping that up.
Yes. So it has already been passed a recommendation, so it will probably be at the next meeting, but we're just working out the draft of this.
Just the template.
Yeah, the templates. Councils take forever to do anything, don't they? Particularly when it's That wasn't a recommendation. That was just a question you asked. Well, I'm sure it was noted by Liz. Yeah. Excellent. I'm going to draw that to a close. Brilliant. I'm sure you will. Right. we now have a presentation which is very much related to this. And actually I'm going to invite Adrian Pengelly, Ian Huckcroft and Howard Smith all together. You may as well all come at once, it makes sense. Although you are doing two separate presentations. Oh, yeah, but do you have a PowerPoint, or are you... Yeah, please go up that end if you want. Or can you click... I'm lost my face now. I'm lost it. What day is it? Is it Monday still? Okay, ladies and gents, we are very fortunate to have a presentation first from Adrian Pengelly, our Service Lead for Housing Assets, and Ian Huckcroft, Innovation Director at is that Regen? Regen, sorry.
Regen.
Sorry.
You're a teacher. Good.
I'm a teacher.
3 out of 10.
There we go. So, over to you two. I believe it's just a presentation then. You happy for us to ask questions?
Yes.
Excellent. Over to you two.
Technical issue, we will review it shortly. So thank you, Chair. Thank you for that introduction. Adrian Pengelly, Service Lead for Housing Assets, and Ian's going to join me. Join me shortly. So thank you for the introduction. If we could just. Yeah, we'll try that. Thanks. I'm really pleased to present this evening, and we've got some slides. Generally, from myself, just talking about the position with the housing assets, and Cream's referred to. Yeah, it doesn't seem to work. No, it's not working. Sorry, I'll just carry on. So essentially, I've heard a lot this evening about making it happen, and that's really key to where we are. And I'm really pleased that we can feed back this evening a little bit of what we did. We were really excited last night to talk to a full member briefing, and essentially the leader started the full member briefing last night with the excerpt from the Exeter City vision, and that really resonates with us incredibly in terms of the opportunities of inclusivity, healthy and sustainable communities, and that clearly is what we're seeking to achieve as far as the stock is concerned. It also resonates with the sustainability of the city, and again what we're attempting to do and bring into action, and hopefully we'll demonstrate that shortly, is some of the initiatives that we're driving forward at the moment. So the aspect of the scale for us is a great opportunity, but also is a great challenge. As Kareem's mentioned earlier, we have 10% of the stock within the city, and that is a responsibility that we take incredibly seriously, and we're very excited about the opportunity of the difference that we can make. The broad breakdown, clearly there's an awful lot of figures behind that, but we have an opportunity in terms of the numbers of flats we have and the way in which we can treat those properties. So an awful lot of strategizing has been taking place for a long period of time, and we're starting to develop our initiatives now, and we will talk about a pilot very shortly in terms of what that's delivering. We've again mentioned this evening the council is pioneering, so we've moved from strategizing, we've moved into delivery, and we're very proud of that. I'll refer very briefly to the new build programme, but tonight is all about the retrofit of the existing stock. But as been mentioned previously, we are delivering to Passive House standard, and we've got an ongoing programme currently agreed for another 100 properties within the housing revenue account, all of which will be delivered to that standard. We're also looking at our specifications. So clearly, as we referred this evening, we are still developing our plans and strategies. And part of what we call our employer's requirement documentation
is being agreed. So the ER document will make sure that we encapsulate best practice, encapsulate all the learning that clearly very much what's been talked about this evening will encompass. We will make sure that that comes to the fore in what we do. We're also looking at a build-up concept, so we want to minimise impact when we do work. Clearly we're thinking about energy when we do that, but we're also thinking about additionality. We know there are pressures on the housing register, and clearly when we do work, if we can combine the energy work we do to additionality, we see great value in doing. We want to maximise benefit as a consequence of what we do. As I mentioned, some of the things we're going to do, and we touched on a number of slides last evening, so those of you that were there will be pleased that I'm not going to go through them all again, but essentially we're very pleased and very proud at our delivery. As I said, we've got 100 properties actually in the pipeline being delivered. The first is a scheme at Thorn Park Rise, and tenants will be getting keys for those in the spring. So these properties will be completed in April, and we're delighted about that. We're also incredibly proud that Exeter is going to have an extra care scheme, which will be delivered in the autumn of the year in September. Again, delivered to Passive House standard, the first in the country, and clearly the specification and the delivery of that is of the highest nature, and it's something we're incredibly proud about. We're also looking at our different stock with quite innovation. So whilst not delivered quite to Passive House, this property on the left is not what we would call a non-traditional property. So it's very poor in terms of its thermal efficiency. And we've taken a very difficult decision because clearly, as you'll see on the right-hand side, it's not the easiest thing in the world to take away one of a pair of semis. But we've done that 17 times, and we've now got a programme of 17 properties that we're actually rebuilding. And the outcome of that will be to provide much better accommodation to those people that will go back to reoccupy those properties. And again, that is taking place at the moment, so I'm very pleased to see that this is again taking place, and this will be delivered to us back again in the autumn of this year. There's a recurring theme here. There's an awful lot of completion dates around September. But again, that's the scale of what we're attempting to do. So we're very pleased about that. But moving on specifically to the retrofit model, and that's why we're here. We, at the moment, have piloted the Energy Sprong principle, and Ian is here, and I'm very pleased, and he's going to run through that with you. And we've decided that that is something we wanted specifically to look at because it does work very well in terms of a retrofit, and it delivers some of these things for us, including net zero energy. We like the fact that it guarantees performance. I mean, that is a very big thing for us, and clearly we're coming at this, of course, from our tenants' perspective, and we like the thought that we can deliver it with modern methods of construction, think about off-site manufacture, and we can guarantee some comfort. So there's a great opportunity for us in looking at a retrofit model, and clearly the one that we've chosen happens to be the Energy Sprong delivery. So very finally from me, just to run through the pilot we've got, and then Ian will give us a little more detail about the actual concept of Energy Sprong. We started off in Chestnut Avenue with a fairly standard pair of properties that you'll see around the city. We went through the design concept and we looked at how we could improve those properties and what that thermal process could do to actually improve the situation for the residents there. So we've got ground source heat pumps, we've got incredible thermal insulation, we've got a PV system, a photovoltaic system on the roofs, which is generating electricity, and actually we've delivered them. So we went through the process of construction. We started that in the autumn of last year, and clearly you can see, roof structures being created, the cladding system in the centre, and the photovoltaic panels being constructed, and we've ended up with a product which is nearing completion. So by the end of January, we'll have 6 properties that we can learn an awful lot more about. They are a pilot. So as has been said many times this evening, we are an incredibly learning authority. We want to take everything that we do and we want to move it on again. We don't want to be best practice, we want to be next practice. So we consider ourselves to look at this, and we will be looking to move forward. So we will be sharing this with our neighbouring partnering authorities. Of course we will, because we want to share that learning. But in terms of the concept, I'll now pass over to Ian, who will just say a little bit more about Energy Sprong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Do I need to turn? Yes. Great, okay. So, energy sprong here. Energy sprong is Dutch for energy leap, and it's the name given to a Dutch government developed approach to delivering net zero energy retrofit of homes. This all started back in the Netherlands in 2010, when the Dutch government called together their housing sector, their construction sector and their manufacturing sector and said, we've got a problem. We need to have a net zero energy building stock in the next couple of decades. The current way that we've been retrofitting buildings by doing cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, adding measures over a period of time isn't going to get us to net zero. What's more, it's very labour intensive, it costs a lot, and we haven't got the skill base to do that to all the properties in the country. The cost of doing it is going up, and the taxpayer can't afford to pay for it. Therefore, we need a completely different approach. And over the next 5 years, between 2010 and 2015, through a process of trial and error, through businesses and landlords and government all working together, they came to an approach by 2015 that was working. And when I say working, I mean they were delivering net zero energy retrofit of houses in a very short period of time per house, days rather than months, all financed by the savings that that retrofit delivered. Savings to the landlord in terms of maintenance costs long term, and savings to the tenant in terms of energy bills long term. Those two savings finance the delivery of the whole retrofit. So they're not shaking any magic money trees in the Netherlands. They're paying for this from money that's already been spent, but just not spent very efficiently. And they've got an industry growing in the Netherlands, building factories to produce this in a very industrialised way. So we as Energy Strong UK, our job is to translate that approach into the UK. And we're starting to work here, and in Nottingham, and in Essex, and in London, and other places. But here in Exeter is one of the first. We're funded by the European Union for the next 3 years, and we're also funded by the Mayor of London through his Retrofit Accelerator programme for the next 3 years. So we're completely non-commercial. Think of us as a publicly funded project. So, this is where I start to explain how Energy Strong works. I start by talking about the cars, actually. So this car was built in a factory in 1974. This car was built in a factory a couple of years ago. Even though it's petrol, it's over 100% more efficient than this car. In the future, it'll be electric and it'll be driving itself. When it's electric, it'll be over 800 times more efficient than this, 800% more efficient than this car. This car is also much more attractive and desirable to drive. It's much, much safer. It's more comfortable. It's got more bells and whistles on it. It's a better product. Do you remember the days when people used to buy extended warranties for their cars? Hardly anybody does that now, because we trust cars. We trust them to go on and on and on. But the killer fact about this car is that it's cheaper. It's significantly cheaper in real terms than this car was. So how on earth does that happen? How do you get a better product for less money? Well, that's what industrialisation does. It delivers better products cheaper through continuous innovation and investment. So let's go to the houses behind. This house was built at the same time as the car, but it was built in a field. Building things in fields is not an efficient way to build things. You can't get the millimetre tight tolerances that you need to build a net zero energy home. So this house here is a net zero energy retrofitted house. It was built in a factory. Actually, it's the wraparound that was built in a factory. Panels built in a factory with insulation, the final finish, the triple glazed windows and doors already installed, delivered on a lorry to site, craned in and and installed on the property in a minimum of time. PV on the roof, generating electricity, and it's guaranteed to produce as much electricity in the course of a year as it consumes in a year for everything, for heating, hot water, and all the plug power that the household needs over the course of a year. What's more, it's guaranteed to have a low energy bill, and it's guaranteed to have a low maintenance bill long term. And that's guaranteed by the company that made it in the factory. Just like the company who makes a car in a factory guarantees its performance long term. So this is an energy strong home. Energy strong is the approach of bringing different things together to make this all work, to make net zero energy a reality, and make it so that we can actually afford to do it at scale, not doing pilot projects, working towards doing every house. For the data hungry members of the audience, this is what a typical UK house uses. 21,500 kilowatt hours of energy a year. Most of that is heating. It uses 3,500 for appliances, and it doesn't generate anything. So that's a total of 21,500. The net zero energy home consumes only 2,000 kilowatt hours a year, mostly for hot water and a little bit of heating. Because the fabric has got so well insulated and it's so airtight that it barely needs any heating. The appliances use about 2,300 with modern appliances. That's more than enough. But it generates 4,300 kilowatt hours a year of its own electricity that it uses here. So it nets off to net zero, and it's very nearly net zero carbon. About 90 to 95% usually net zero carbon now. When the grid is fully decarbonised, as it will be in the next decade or so, that will be 100% net zero carbon building. Because this house, if this is connected to gas, this house isn't connected to gas. It's electric only, no fossil fuels. So what we're doing here in Devon and in Exeter is a project that's demonstrating the energy strong approach and helping to build a supply chain locally that can do this at scale in the future. ZCAT stands for Zero Energy Building Catalyst. It's a 3-year project, and this is the final year. This is the year of completion. And these are your partners. You're partnering with Sanctuary Housing, properties in Paynton, North Devon Homes, properties in Burrington in North Devon. You're partnering with the County Council, who are leading it and have helped the funding all come together from the European Union, and Regen, who I also work with, have been responsible for developing the concept, developing the project, and delivering it with you. So this is a very short video from one company in the Netherlands. I look forward to the day when we've got a Devon company who can make a video like this of a net zero energy retrofit happening in one day on site. We'll turn the sound down a bit, actually. Is it possible to turn the sound down? Anyway, I'll talk over it. This is a bit of preamble. They're loading up panels they've made in their factory. A few weeks before, I think that was the wrong direction. A few weeks before the one day on site, they've laser measured. They've installed brackets on the property that they're going to hang panels off. They've gone back to their factory. They've made panels, loaded it up onto a lorry, turned up on site at dawn. So the residents just left for work. This is an energy module with a heat pump, with a battery, with a thermal store, with ventilation in it. See the ducting here fits into ducting that's in the panel to minimise the disruption internally in the property. They're hanging those panels off brackets screwed into the wall. The triple glazed windows and doors are already installed. A very simple job to connect the plumbing and electrics to what's already in the property. There's a simple reveal system to make a nice deep windowsill, minimum of disruption inside the house. The roof goes on, very lightweight, All they've done to the roof is take the tiles off just to reduce the loading. The PV becomes the final weatherproof covering. Slots together really effectively. The final bits and pieces like the ridge line and the guttering going on. This is after lunch. The last panels arriving to site. Craned on, no scaffolding. All fits together very neatly and easily. This is the guttering system. This property had a brick shed at the back. The landlord wanted to disability living proof the property for the future, so they've knocked that down. They replaced it with this factory made module that's capable of being a ground floor wet room in the future. So it just shows it's a very adaptable approach. It's not just about energy, it's about comfort, it's about health, it's about regeneration, it's about improving the look and feel of properties. So when you come home from work in the evening, this is what you come home to. A completely different, regenerated property. It looks great, it feels great, it's net zero, it's a guaranteed low bill, it's a guaranteed low maintenance cost, and it's fit for the 21st century. So we're about not doing one-offs, we're about doing the whole street, and the whole neighbourhood, and the whole city. But you have to start somewhere. And we started here in Exeter with 6 on Chestnut Avenue. That's the same company in the Netherlands. They've done the same approach in the same archetype. These are different companies in the Netherlands. This one here is a neighbourhood in Arnhem where they've done 2,500. They've done the whole estate. And it's so lifted, the whole estate. The knock-on benefits of doing this are huge. Kids have got a warm bedroom to do their homework in the winters because the family's not all living in one heated room with a TV on. It lifts aspiration because you're living in a neighbourhood that looks great, feels great, actually looks better than the owner-occupied estate down the road. These are homes to be really proud of. This is a semi. The energy module is put into the porch here, all hidden away. It actually looks like a new build, but it is a retrofit. They're not bricks, it's a brick effect finish. This is a wacky Dutch archetype, and we have wacky archetypes here as well. And the solution here is that they've put additional accommodation on the roof, which really makes the business model work because there's additional rental income as well as the energy and maintenance savings. And we're beginning with Adrian's team. We've appointed some competition winners from the private sector to design a build-up and retrofit solution using the Energy Strong approach here in Exeter. This is an English factory that did the panels for the first UK project in Nottingham in 2018. So we can do this here, but we haven't quite got to the Dutch level of sophistication yet, where this is a robot in a production line making a panel that fits the property that it was designed for. The Dutch have been able to do that because Dutch housing associations and social landlords have built this sector together. Using their demand for net zero retrofit, they've clubbed together and they've gone out to the market for a really long-term contract of 100,000 homes to be net zero retrofitted over a period of 4 to 5 years. That length of contract and that length of time gives the finance horizon for a company to think, I can't afford to miss this opportunity. And it also gives them it makes them competitive, it makes them compete for the work. But it also makes them, once they've won the work, to build factories locally off the back of the contract, off the back of the market that's created by social landlords. Our aim is that we build an industry using social housing demand that can then go on and retrofit owner-occupiers and private rented property. But it starts here with social housing. So I'll talk briefly about the 3 steps that are really important in delivering the energy strong approach to net zero retrofit. So first of all, the client, the landlord, you in this case, ask for a different product. You ask a company to design a solution, build and install a solution, and guarantee the performance of that solution over the long term, up to 30 years. That's very different to the way that you procure the supply chain currently to do work for you. So you're giving it all over to the supply chain as long as they meet your outcomes. What you're interested in is the outcomes. So the outcomes that we're buying from the supply chain is net zero energy. I explained how that works over the course of a year, some import and export at different times, but using a lot less energy, and over the course of a year being net zero energy. That's a proxy for net zero carbon. Carbon's a bit nebulous, it's difficult to measure, and it doesn't have a price per unit of carbon. Whereas energy we're used to measuring, and it's got a price. So if you reduce the use of energy, that feeds into the business model. And when the grid fully decarbonises, it will be net zero carbon. No gas, disconnected for gas. We've got passive house type standards for the thermal efficiency of the building. We've got more than enough plug power for normal use in the home. We've got more than enough hot water for daily use. Every room will be warm every day of the year, guaranteed. 21 degrees C in living space, to 18 degrees C in bedrooms. If people want to be warmer, they can turn the dial up. They won't be cut off, but they'll just pay a bit extra for the kilowatt hours that will be imported. Not a lot extra, because it's so thermally efficient, it doesn't need that much more energy to get the temperature up. The air quality inside is better than building regs for new build. So that's an end to mould, damp, condensation, all those health issues, and all the cost issues to you as a landlord as well. Complies and reduces fire risk better than building regs, and the maintenance cost to you, the landlord, and the energy cost to the tenant are guaranteed to be low, long term. So what we're aiming for is a maximum of 15 days on site. You saw that Dutch company's got it down to 1 day on site. That's the direction of travel. That's what we're flagging to the supply chain. Innovate constantly until you get to there. The quality is assured, and because the company is doing everything, they're designing, building and guaranteeing, it means they've got to use really high quality materials and products, and they've got to install it right, and they've got to design it really well so that it really does perform, because if it doesn't, they're on the hook for paying the additional maintenance and energy bill long term. It's affordable to you, the landlord, and to the tenant, because you're financing it off long-term energy and maintenance savings. And really importantly, we want people to demand this for their homes, not resist it. And what's going to get them to really demand this and love it is that it looks great, it feels great, it's aspirational, something to be really proud of. So that's the first thing we need to do energy strong. A different product in a different way. The second thing we need to do is focus on the people who live in the property. They're the key to this. So Energy Strong is an easy to understand product with guaranteed comfort every day, guaranteed warm rooms, guaranteed enough hot water, guaranteed enough plug power, guaranteed good indoor air quality and no noise for a fixed monthly cost. Part of that fixed monthly cost comes to you, the landlord. So the total bill is guaranteed to be low than what they were paying before to the tenant. Previously, all of their bill went to the utility company to buy for the import of energy. After the retrofit, the total bill is lower. There's a small electricity bill that goes to the utility just for that energy that's imported at peak times, when the battery's flat and it's not producing from the PV. And the rest of it goes to you, the landlord, in a small weekly or monthly charge that's set and guaranteed over the long term. And that's essential. You have to have that, or else you will not be able to afford to do this to all your properties. You'll be stuck in the cycle of doing nice pilot projects, and you'll hit the buffers when your budget runs out. This is all about paying for itself, transferring money that's already been spent into doing the capital works and paying it back from the savings over the long term. The third thing we need to do is to create a market. And volume is key to this. If you think back to the automotive industry, can you imagine how much a car would cost if you wanted to buy one car, but there were only 10 cars being made in the country a year? They'd be millions, wouldn't they? But because there are hundreds of thousands of cars being made, the price is low. And the price is low because the volume's high. So we have to get the volume high for this, for housing retrofit as well. And this is what we do as Regen and Energy Strong UK. We're working with you, landlords, to explain this to you, to show you how it can be a better way of managing your housing assets, better for you financially, better for your tenants financially, better socially, and certainly better environmentally. We work with the supply chain, getting them involved, helping them to understand this, helping them to understand the technical challenges and how to overcome them, and helping them to become manufacturing companies rather than construction companies. So the company that we've let the Devon project to is a Devon-based company, MySpace. They're in the transition from being a normal construction company to being the low-carbon company of the future that we want to have doing our homes, retrofitting our homes. We also work with governments. We've got a very good dialogue with national government, and we hope that in the near future there'll be some more supportive policy and funding coming out of national government. And we also work with local government, of course, because you can really drive this in your localities. As Kareem said, it's cities that are driving this agenda, cities like you. So, business model, in summary, we're about converting some of this money and some of this money into capital to pay for net zero retrofit year after year after year, and repaying the money off the savings on these two budget lines. So UK social housing spends £5.2 billion a year maintaining houses to be pretty much the same as they always have been. Not improving, just maintaining. Your tenants are spending £4.2 billion a year. Many of them are cold for that. That's not what they should be spending to be warm. That's what they can afford to spend. So the Energy Strong business model takes this and that, puts it into capital, and repays the money out of the savings from future years' budgets. This is how it works currently with a leaky home that's inefficient, leaking heat, leaking money. The tenant pays for electricity and gas if they're connected for import, and they pay by unit plus standing charge, and they pay you the rent, and you've got a tenancy agreement to govern that. This is how it works in the net zero future. This is an Energy Strong home, very efficient, using 90+% less energy than it was before. There's still a grid connection, there's still an electricity bill, but no gas bill. It's disconnected. Most of the electricity bill is actually a standing charge, with a little bit of electricity import at peak times. There's still a rental agreement, a tenancy agreement. They're still paying you rent, but the tenant is also paying you a small comfort plan charge on top. And they have to guarantee that the home will be will be comfortable for the combined cost of the comfort plan charge and the utility bill. That's a guaranteed low cost to the tenant, and it's guaranteed to be less than what they were spending before. They get a small financial saving, they get a warmer home, much warmer home, a better home all round. So, any questions?
Thank you very much, Ian. I was about to stop you there and say, when's this going to stop? I mean, I love your passion, but I know members are going to have questions. Thank you very much. That was excellent.
You're welcome.
Really, really, really good.
Thank you, and thank you to you. You know, the leadership that you've taken as a council to take this step to do this, one of the first places in the country to do it. You know, I can't thank you enough for that. And I think we can follow on. Kareem and the leader and the portfolio holder were on site yesterday. I think you've seen it for yourselves now, and you can see how we can really use your housing stock to drive an industry developing here in Devon to do not just your own houses, but owner-occupied houses and private rented houses too in the future. This is how we do net zero retrofit in housing, and this is how we pay for it as well, of a sustainable business model.
Thank you, Ian. That's it's brilliant, very inspiring. I saw Councillor Atkinson's hand first. Then to you.
Thank you. Can I say how incredibly proud I am that Exeter is one of the first in the country to do this, alongside, I think you said 2 others, Nottingham
and Moat Homes in Essex.
And Moat Homes. And actually Nottingham is also a Labour-controlled council, so I'm going to make the political point to show that we in the Labour Party are totally committed to dealing with the climate emergency. So that's my political point. I understand the net present value argument, though you didn't put the slide up this time, which was that over 30 years we would be spending 85,000 on a property, whereas over the same 30 years with the investment in this it would only be 55. However, that's over 30 years. We have to get the capital funds today in order to get the gains over 30 years. So we've got the business case. So I suppose this is a question for Bindu and Kareem, really, is how are we going to raise that capital fund in order to retrofit all our 5,000 properties? Over what time? Are we totally dependent on the lending cap, the borrowing cap, that we have in place, and from getting our money from the Public Works Loan Board? Because as people know, even though interest rates were low, the government raised the interest rate on the Public Works Loan Board for all local authorities, and that seriously affected local authorities' ability to both build and improve council houses, because it's now more expensive to do it. So if we're going to do this by 2030, have we got the capital funds?
So, Chair, at the beginning, I cautioned about really narrowing things and being ambiguous, because we as a city, so Ian is giving us a pilot of 6. We got 5,000 council houses, we got 50,000 homes, and of them a great proportion to deliver the outcomes we'll need to do it. And the government struggled on the Green Deal.
Yes.
Yeah. And so when we do this blueprint, and I think what Liz was saying is, we actually know the ingredients is all the industrial buildings, all the commercial stock will also need to be retrofit. We're talking about a single thing. And so we're going to have to think about the financial instruments, the mechanisms. But I'm convinced Devon's on the same page. Devon is committed to this 2030 timetable. And our local enterprise partnership has submitted its industrial strategy. It says we're going to be the clean growth. And as part of that, I would hope our local enterprise partnership gets from government a deal, like the West of England has got a deal and Manchester has got a deal. And that if we get a deal, we will look at innovative financial solutions of the kind of issues that we want to showcase the rest of the UK. And so what I'm hesitant to do is on any single thing to say here and now that's what we're going to do, because at the moment we're trying to keep the houses repaired based on the money, the model we ran. But what we have got, and the thing that really gets my creative juices going on this one, is the economic issue. Because when we talk about the challenges of fuel poverty and skills and getting people into the construction industry, the one thing I liked was you've got a factory in Blackburn. You imagine having a factory within our community which is building a product like this, that becomes the way we deliver across the region. So the economic benefits of this could be very significant. So what I would like to do is, rather than parcel up every discrete piece of work we're going to do, we need to have strategic conversations with every aspect of government. Because one of the things is, if I get frustrated with things, it's because what I see is hive of activity. So how has been dealing with, what's the government department, Department of Energy?
Can you just
I'm sorry.
This is more for members now to ask questions.
Yeah, you are right.
Do continue your point, but
No, I'm sorry. I've made a point.
No.
Well, he did in a roundabout way, but he didn't.
I mean, I would, I'd chip in and say that to do all your houses is going to cost about £250 million over 30 years. But how much money are you going to have in your planned maintenance budget over 30 years? You've got quite a lot in there. If you add up everything that your tenants are spending on energy over 30 years, and energy bills are going to go up for sure, it's a lot of money.
It's borrowing it up front.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Adrian. Adrian's going to come in now and he'll give
So
us
essentially,
some facts.
as Ian said, we've got a very healthy capital programme which fluctuates between £8 and £12 million each year. We're shifting the emphasis of that. We've dealt with decent homes primarily for the stock. What we need to think about is what we've talked about this evening is energy and the efficiency and the comfort for tenants. The issues around some of the sort of factors of sort of mould and those sorts of things which we're dealing with, but we're dealing with them case by case. This is a wider solution to those issues, and we're excited about the prospects. So capital programme is what we will be targeting, but clearly driving numbers more quickly is exactly as Cream said.
Thank you very much. Councillor Patson.
My main question has already been asked, so thanks for that. So I'll answer the other ones concern the building materials and the cladding, basically. I mean, we've heard this before. Excellent building materials, great design, and then 30 years down the road, they're busy pulling them down. How sure are we that the building materials are excellent, and will the building design be appropriate in, say, 30 years' time?
So immediately the thing
Shall I ask a series, or sorry?
Why don't you ask all the questions you've got?
Yeah, so that's that one. The issue of cladding and safety issues. Can we reassure our tenants that the cladding will be safe? Because I'm sure that will be an issue for them. The other issue, perhaps, is, well, for me personally, the heating. I don't want my bedroom to be at 18 degrees, thank you very much. Are there ways that you can actually lower the heating? Because I think even particularly in the midst of winter, that may be a little too warm, and you're going out into a cold old world out there. So that was really the other one.
Thank you. Adrian, I'm sure, has got all the answers.
I have indeed, Chair. Thank you. So 30 years is a number you've mentioned a couple of times, and that's the length of the guarantee. The length of the guarantee for the product. So absolutely, design is key to this, and very much design is tenant engagement. And I mentioned in my very brief slides at the start that part of the approach we take is thinking about the community and thinking about the aesthetic. So design is a key principle of that. Safety is, of course, incredibly important to us. So these are fire-rated products. And while some of them might have looked like wood panels, they're not. They were composite cement board, I think, weren't they? So essentially they're a different product, but just to give it a different finish. And clearly in each individual area there will be a different solution that we think works, but clearly we would want to consult on. And some of that, of course, might be we might need to take a view from our planning officers as well. So absolutely, and the heating is controllable.
Thank you. Just to say that the that product that you have on your properties at Chestnut Avenue is not flammable. It's made out of inflammable material. It's a metal frame with mineral wool as the insulation, and the board on the front is not flammable either. It's capable of being certified to A1, which is basically not flammable at all. It cannot be burnt. It costs £55,000 to get that certification, to run it through the test to A1. The company that delivered it wants to get that certification as soon as possible, because everybody asks the same question that you do, and rightfully so. When they get the next contract, which is big enough to finance the £55,000 testing cost, they will do it.
Councillor Newby.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, screech. Sorry about that. Yeah, you're saying about, you just started to open up on a question I was going to ask. You're encapsulating an old building with a new building.
Yes.
So all of the issues of the old building are still there. They've not gone away. They've not all just crept out overnight and disappeared and left you the outside building. So how can you say that the fire resistances or fire regulations are going to be adhered to when you've got an old building sitting there? And I'm putting my old fireman's head on here, but
yes,
so I should tell you that. That's sitting there, decomposing as we speak, because you've now stuck another building on the outside of it. How does it breathe? How does it operate? How does it keep that constant temperature of the bricks, the mortar, and everything else in situ, and stops it going up?
So the A1 fire safety rating is on the product that's retrofitted.
Right. So that's on the outside.
That's on the outside.
But the inside doesn't have it, does it?
So the inside doesn't have that.
No.
But it is bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got furniture and appliances in there.
Yeah.
That how do you govern that? The internal quality of the air has to meet a really high standard, better than building regs for new homes.
Right.
And therefore, it has to have ventilation.
Yeah.
It has to be ventilated. That's what gets rid of mold and damp for good, forever. And the heating system all supports that as well. You know, properties that can be afforded to be properly heated don't have that decomposition issue that you mentioned. So there's no decay over time. So yes, you are wrapping up an old building with a new building, but it's helping to stabilise the condition of that building that was already there. So structurally, it's a plus.
But you and I both know that concrete, after 50 years, starts going home.
I think Adrian's going to pick up on some points.
And if I
Sorry.
may just come back on the final part of that, so externally, exactly that, internally.
Oh, sorry.
So we are a very diligent landlord, so we will still undertake safety checks in relation to gas. We best practice in terms of fixed wire testing, wiring every 5 years. We undertake a tenancy inspection at least every 2 years, but probably more frequently. So we are very diligent in terms of considering how the building is used. The structural condition of it that you're referring to, we undertake stock condition surveys. We're approaching 70% of that as accurate data now. So we've surveyed that level of stock. So we are looking at the building, we're looking at how it's performing, and in terms of the internal leaf, we will keep that under scrutiny. But you know, fundamentally, we're not seeing any decay in those buildings, and we're projecting the length
longevity.
of longevity. That's the word I'm seeking. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Owen.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mention has been made of the 30-year guarantee on the product. This guarantee, I assume, being made by the company. Who is guaranteeing the company?
That's a very good question. So 30 years is our target. We're being very pragmatic at the start, and we're having we're achieving performance guarantees that are shorter than that at the moment. But the supply chain know that they have to get to a place at 30 years before we start committing to volume. Sorry, what was the rest of your question?
Well, who's guaranteeing the company?
Ah, yes.
Yeah, obviously,
So,
to state the obvious,
yeah.
the company is only is there as long as it's in
That's
existence.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we've seen big companies like Carillion go under. So we're dealing with that in a number of different ways. So MySpace have got a parent company guarantee from their parent company Midas on this contract. There are products that you can buy in the marketplace to insure against the risk of the company that's providing you the guarantee going bust during the guarantee period. There's a cost to that, and you as a landlord will have to make a commercial decision about the cost of that insurance product versus the likelihood of that company going bust, or the likelihood of that guarantee not being met, actually.
Thank you
And
very much.
as this market grows, we've spoken to the insurance industry, and they say they've got no problem with providing an insurance product for this, but they need volume. They need volume to deliver a cost-effective insurance product to guarantee against that and other risks.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. A great presentation, and thank you for your work on this. It's great. I've got. I also think it's really good because actually it can improve jobs in the construction sector and potentially offer more opportunities for women. So I think this is fantastic. I'm just one question about: you talked about including solar and heat pumps, but are you looking, or have you included batteries for storage? And have you considered the whole life cycle of the building? So obviously, at the end of that 30 years, what do you do with this material when it's done with?
Oh gosh, I'm totally remembering multiple questions. Batteries, yes. So yes, the Exeter properties do have electric batteries and thermal stores for hot water in them. We don't specify any product, technology or material. We just specify the outcome. So the reason the battery is there is because it's the most cost-effective way of meeting the guaranteed low cost to the tenant on the energy bill. Because it means that the battery stores the electricity that's been produced by the PV when the household isn't using it, so that it can be used later, like in the evening, so it's not importing from the grid. So we think that's the best way of driving this market, is specify the outcomes, not the technology. Let the companies, let the supply chain work out for themselves what's the best combination of technologies for that particular house in this particular location at this particular time. And that gives them the flexibility to be able to innovate actually and drive new components and better components to come into the market because they're demanding them.
And just on the second point, in terms of the environmental strategy around products, we're looking at that. We're rewriting our asset management plan, and part of that will include, for all contracts, all products that we use, it will consider the environmental impact of all the products we use. Clearly, there's a cost-benefit analysis that we undertake when we let contracts and understand the products that we're going to be installing, but that will form very much part of that end-of-life consideration.
And the Chestnut Avenue properties have a metal frame which is capable of being recycled, but the intention is that you don't take all this off after 30 years. Just because the performance guarantee lasts for 30 years and you finance off 30 years, it doesn't mean it falls apart on 31 years. The Mauer system actually has a 60-year guarantee on it, which is more than you get on it, with the same as what you get on a new build actually.
Councillor Atkinson.
You're pleased to hear that was my question and it's just been answered.
Excellent, thank you. Then I think that concludes the debate. One thing I would like to just been doing, because I'd quite like to do something with this, because it's been an excellent presentation, but a really good discussion. I think we'd like to hear about progress or something in the future. So you might have some ideas about how we as a committee can do something with this.
Certainly, Chair. So we're at the stage now where obviously we've completed the pilot and we'll kind of await an outturn report from that pilot. And we're happy to share with members of this committee what we've learned. What I think you've heard from Kareem and Adrian is that it's difficult to identify clearly immediately what the next steps forward are. In terms of our housing stock, as Adrian said, we certainly know what capital we have to put forward. We just need to identify the best way of deploying that, and really happy to keep the committee informed of our thinking as we go along.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
As a committee, if those who want to visit the properties to have a good look at them, to see the construction side of it, I mean, it would intrigue me to see how you've done it. I mean, a friend of mine who's got similar up in the States, I mean, they were there a day and it was up and running. And I thought, wow, this is phenomenal. And now you're coming up with this concept, and I'm thinking, this is even better. I know there's a German company that does something similar as well, isn't there? The prefabrication of dwellings.
There are a number of modular processes.
Yeah. But this looks really good. I'm really impressed with this. So if that's possible.
That's certainly possible. We can arrange for a visit.
Thank you.
They're just finishing off on site at the moment and making good around the properties. The tenants have been real guinea pigs on this. They've had people on site for quite a lot longer than we'd envisaged because the company that did it has done the right thing. They've started with the best designs that they could think up at the time, and as they've gone on, they've learned things and they've changed things and they've paused, and then they've redesigned and carried on, and that's why you do a demonstration project. So at some point, I think we'll have to thank those tenants because they've had a lot of disruption, but they will have very warm, affordable homes as a result.
Thank you very much. Right, that concludes that, I believe. Thank you very much for coming in to speak. We now have a final item. Unfortunately, Howard, you have the graveyard slot. But, it all links very well. I think we've tried to make these as thematic as possible. So, Howard, you're here to talk about the consultation on the Future Building Home Standards 2025, and then you'll take questions. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, not only the graveyard slot, but also is a pretty dry subject. We are not in the realms of exciting zero carbon and net zero energy. We're in the realms of minimum standards. So here we go. So the building regs are how the government sets the minimum standard for buildings, and in this case they've got a consultation out on new dwellings, and it is about changes in 2020, so changes this year and in 2025, giving a lot of detail about changes this year and less detail, but some sort of thematics about the future. So, borrowed a graph from the university and added a bit to it. This is where we were in 2012. We were very happy. We just adopted our local plan. So we've got various scales here, building regs, progressing, carbon per square metre footprint, a way of measuring carbon performance of buildings, Exeter core strategy policy, and what was the code for sustainable homes levels. And this point is zero carbon. So this is where we want to be. This is how we thought we were progressing towards it through building regulations, but also accelerating that with Exeter planning policies adopted in 2012, reducing in 2013 and reducing to zero in 2016. So what happened? So scroll forward to 2015. Oh, sorry. As part of it, there was something then to, as well as the on-site carbon savings, we were looking forward to something called allowable solutions, where people could make payments in lieu of carbon savings they couldn't do on-site. If we scroll forward to 2015, basically what had happened, a lot of that was simply got rid of. The Code for Sustainable Homes has been scrapped. The changes in building regulations we expected in 2013, thought were going to be here, ended up here. And local planning authorities have been capped from what they can require through planning policies, and the government capped it at the former Code for Sustainable 4 level. It's here. This is where we are today. We are requiring more than current building regulations, but we are prevented from doing any more than that. So why did that happen? Well, government was lobbied, and they were persuaded. There were good reasons why they shouldn't implement those changes. And that's why we think it's important that we do respond to this consultation. We want to make sure, as well as doing some of the amazing stuff we're doing on our own stock, it's the minimum standards that other people will be working to, making sure those are as high as we can possibly make them, and recognising that other people will be lobbying in a different direction. So there is a series of consultations. 2020, we've got the consultation now, the black arrows, and just say in between there was an awful lot of research and further consultation, further lobbying on all sides, and then in 2024, 2025, you'll see a further tightening. What does that look like on our graph? Well, if they did what they say they're going to do in the consultation document, 2020 we come to that point. This is for a typical building. It's very crude, but roughly there. 2025 building regs would take us to there in the direction there. But we're also, part of it is they stop us from doing even what we're doing now. So if we don't get building regulations that way in 2020, we end up somewhere here, we actually go backwards as a city because we are stopped from using our planning policy at all. So there's a couple of options around that 2020. It's an overall figure they've got to meet, so with certain details within it. And we're relaxed, we're not going to go into the details of U values. We just talk about that headline figure, but it is open to people how they meet that. So crudely, let's just really take it, just show there are lots of different ways of doing it. Here's a couple of ways you could do it. Take your existing product on the left, which is not very well insulated, quite thin walls, existing building regulations, and you add an air source heat pump. So you've reduced your carbon content of your heating, you're still using the same amount of energy. You reduce the carbon content of that, it looks quite good. Just got an air source heat pump on the building, and everyone can see. Oh, this is good, isn't it? We can see something, and it's reduced the carbon. But it's using the same amount of energy, so it's expensive to run. Easy to build. If you're a volume house builder, you haven't changed your house type, you simply got rid of the gas boiler, put in an air source heat pump, but you've got it to tick in the box. You met the building regulations. Another way of meeting it, getting the same carbon content, and we are talking here about this 20-30% change. We're not talking about the net zero carbon, we're just talking different ways of getting to that 20-30% saving. Is you do the sort of approach that we've done in our council houses through passive house type approach. You improve your insulation and you tighten up on your energy recovery from ventilation. So you're recovering the heat from ventilation as you pump air out. If you've got more airtight building, you're actually recovering the heat from it as it goes and warming up the fresh air coming in. You might still initially have a gas boiler in there, and people might say, well, this is still on gas, this is still using fossil fuels. But actually, it's the same carbon content. That's the one on the left, same carbon efficiency as the one on the left. But it is much less expensive to run, but more expensive to build. So if you're a builder and you're thinking about building a house and selling it, I wonder what you think about more, is the cost to build or the cost to run, which way are you going to go? And that's the concern. An energy hierarchy, you'll find lots of examples of this, recycling, so just using less. First of all, I think you should use less before you look at how you decarbonise that, before you look at renewable energy. And that's the approach we want to promote as we respond to the building regs consultation. And I think it is really important we do look at the right sort of changes. Because within the details of the headline figure, there are going to be standards for fabric. So we should insist those being as high as they can. We've got evidence in the Passive House programme. What's the cost of doing that? What's the cost of Passive House? It's actually just without using any renewable energy. It's kind of up here. Energy strong is a bit further, but Passive House, once we decarbonise the electricity coming from the grid, also moves to zero carbon. If you're not taking that approach, if you've got a leaking house and an air source heat pump, it's much harder to then make that further change. You're looking at a further retrofit to get towards zero carbon. There's a whole host of measures in the building regs. There's a proposal that we change the temperature of heating in houses, the water going around your central heating, changing that to 55 degrees. I'm sure many people will lobby against that, but that's really good for preparing houses for the future. So we can change from gas to ground source heat pumps and use them efficiently. We need to support that. We need to put evidence in there. There's a proposal to put an affordability metric in there. So they are actually going to look at the house type, measure it, and tell people how much is this going to cost to run. I'm sure there'll be people lobbying against that, and we need to put evidence in to support that metric. There are other things in there that are genuinely welcome. There's a problem at the moment with building regs of transition between one set of building regs and the next. And if you've got a big site and you've got planning permission for 500 houses, you can pre-register it and you can keep building out the 500 at whatever building regs were at the start of your, or the year before you started building. There's a proposal that they do it plot by plot. So when you start each house, you have to look at what are the building regs at that time. I'm sure there were people lobbying against that, and we've got to lobby in favour of it. There is a proposal that they test every house that's built for air tightness. At the moment, builders, they take a sample of houses, and those are tested. Don't test every house. There's good evidence there that maybe they pay a bit more attention to the houses that they know are going to be air tightness tested. So we need to support that all houses should be air tightness tested. We've got a deadline on 9th of February to put in a response to this. University of Exeter helping us with the technical details, and we hope members will support us in doing that and promoting a fabric first approach.
Apologies, I was discussing something with Bendy. Fantastic, thank you very much. Chris, did you want to come in?
Credit to Howard and what he's doing, and the lead he's been taking on this whole agenda over a number of years, in spite of the support really for what the government's been doing. We've been really sticking to what we believe is the right thing to be done. The reason I want to mention, sometimes things get lost when we try to communicate things. So when we published Liverpool Exeter housing, transformation housing plan, 12,000, we were being asked about, are you going to deliver this carbon neutral housing? And we were trying to explain, and it gets difficult to explain, we couldn't give a commitment that we would deliver this carbon neutral housing, not because of our leadership or lack of leadership, is because the building regulations don't allow us to refuse planning permissions when house builders put their applications in when they're delivering less. But that's the reason why Howard's here tonight, because basically we need to respond to government, and we can't have a goal to be carbon neutral in 2030, and then the big building regulations prevent us from holding developers. So we meet with developers and we tell them directly. We do it by leadership and example by ourselves. But when it comes to you volume house builders, and I shouldn't just pick on volume house builders, but the construction industry, we want you, because if they're submitting applications for 1,000 houses, the chances are that will build out by 2030. So I would just ask members if you would endorse the recommendation that Howard's suggesting we make to the government, and be aware that they will be under a lot of pressure in the other direction, and if we don't state these things, the tendency might be to water it down. and we need everybody signed up to that commitment.
Thank you for that, Chris. Just while I bring in Councillor Newby, I would need some wording, some statements, something for us to pass in a minute if we wish to, something to discuss. So while Councillor Newby is asking a question, if you could think of some wording, that would be helpful for us to discuss.
Howard, you're talking about the building regulations, and I know that we've lost that. If a company comes here with a planning application and they employ their own building regs people, we've got no jurisdiction over going on site and looking at the old-fashioned way of are the footings correct, are this correct and that correct. We've had an issue already with a certain developer, I won't mention his name, their names I should say, where they forgot to put fire stops in. Not the easiest thing to forget, but the most important thing to forget. They have been rectifying it, I have to say that, since we had the fire over there. But this is where I think the old school of having Clerk of the Works and our own regulation team is paramount, because it's us that pass the plans. It should be us that say that building is sound to put someone in it, or for that person to buy it, not just go, oh, we've got nothing to do now. Is there any way we could lobby to get that back again, or is it gone now forever?
I'm certain there's nothing in this consultation that would change the system of approving inspectors. No, there is no.
Well, I mean, if we want to lobby for that, it's lobbying through Parliament, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
Going to look to one of our directors to give us some wording.
So Howard will nod if this isn't correct, but what we're suggesting is that members endorse a response to the consultation, to the building regulations consultation that Howard's just been going through, that ensures consistency with the city's stated aim of a carbon neutral Exeter by 2030.
And,
thank you.
Add the fabric first approach.
Yeah.
The highest fabric stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
What I'm going to do at this point is propose that as a recommendation of the committee.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. So you can have the wording again, please.
You're not taking further comment?
Yeah, can do afterwards.
I can do after the recommendation's been passed. We can then discuss the recommendation. Sorry, Sharon.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm proposing, and Councillor Nubia seconded, that members support a response to the building regulation consultation that ensures a consistency with the city's stated aim of a carbon neutral Exeter 2030 and a fabric first approach to the highest standard. That is now open up for debate. Councillor Atkinson, then Councillor Moore.
Can I welcome that? I'm really disappointed that our friends in Extinction Rebellion, I don't know if this gentleman is not here, to listen to this very important point, because I did make it to them on the way in, and it's really good that the community hear that there's been a lot of criticism about us as a council, and I would suggest that in addition to that recommendation, that it's your response is circulated to us as councillors so that we can see it, and that there is a full communication with the press, that this gets out there and the reasons why. And I think when I asked you to do that press release, if you could do the backstory that's just been given to us, about since 2014, so that members of our community can understand why we are where we are. And also, the other comment I want to make is this is a real test of this government. If it does cave into that lobby, then, their commitment, we will have to come back to them and say their commitment to climate emergency is not good enough for us in Labour and Labour councils. Because if they do cop out, then we are going to suffer and our children are going to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I was going to make the same request as Councillor Atkinson, that the response was published, and hopefully other people will respond as well. That would be very good, and really support all the things that you've said. I also think the point about affordability and operation is a really important point to emphasise, particularly because the government will go on again about affordable homes, and actually we need to have it affordable in operation equally as important. So that's my thoughts.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, those, to me, aren't recommendations. They are things officers will do if this is passed. But I'm sure you can be involved in that. But Howard, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, just say no. We can circulate the responses to the large number of questions that are in that consultation, and we can do that before the 9th. And if anybody else wants to use them to make their own response, they're welcome.
Excellent, thank you. I can't see anyone else wishing to speak, so we will take a vote on this recommendation. I won't read it out again because it's been read out twice already. All those in favour of the recommendation? Excellent, it's been unanimous all night. Fantastic. What I'm going to do, because it is 8 o'clock, is I remove my additional item for consideration for future meetings and ask you to email myself or Sharon ahead of the next Scrutiny Programme Board meeting. Just please do throw ideas at us. It's in March. It'd be really nice to have those ideas. I'm going to formally close the meeting unless anyone else has anything. Excellent, fantastic. That's 8 o'clock. Thank you.